1992, BBC Television Centre, West London. Talk show host Michael Parkinson begins broadcasting to the nation a one-off Halloween special investigating the paranormal.
The programme you're about to watch is a unique live investigation of the supernatural.
The programme begins like any normal chat show, features, interviews, phone-ins. But Michael is unaware that in the 90 minutes that follows, he'll not only catch a real ghost on camera, but he'll unintentionally lure that demonic entity into the live studio and across the country into the homes of 11 million viewers.
Get the link back. Get the link back.
The 1990s saw the rise of postmodernism and playful spins on classic genres. This would become very apparent in the mid-90s with movies like Scream or Wes Craven's New Nightmare. But before all this, one BBC Halloween special did something so daring, so groundbreaking, so ahead of its time, that audiences literally had no idea how to react. It baffled and terrified the nation, and despite never being broadcast on television since, its legacy lives on, and it's now thought of as one of the most influential horror movies of all time.
Don't leave me, Mum!
Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of the ghost story, and we review Stephen Volk's mockumentary masterpiece, Ghostwatch. Welcome back to the Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. If you're joining us for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres across a number of weeks. We are currently in the midst of exploring the evolution of the ghost story, and this is part 11, in which we're going to look at that classic television special from the early 90s, Ghostwatch. Very excited to get into this. Now, before we get started, don't forget, you can email us. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @evolutionpod or on Facebook. That's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. You can now follow us on Letterboxd. That's where we'll be updating the list of movies that we're going to be covering throughout this series of ghost stories, and you can create your own little watch list and keep up to date. Now, later on, I'll be joined by the brilliant Boyd Hilton, and he'll be discussing and dissecting Ghostwatch with me in detail. But first of all, I got the chance to sit down and chat to the director of Ghostwatch, who made this television special over 25 years ago and probably had no idea that she would still be interviewed about it and talking about it today. Here is my chat with the brilliant Lesley Manning. Lesley, welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining me. I mean, did you ever think that sort of back in 1992 you would still be talking about Ghostwatch all these years later?
Not at all. Not at all.
I mean, first of all, I just want to ask you, what's your kind of opinion on the horror genre? Are you a fan of horror?
I do remember one of my earliest memories of cinema was Jaws. When I sat up and thought, this is actually what it's all about. So I wouldn't call myself a horror fan. I'm not a muck and blood horror fan.
Sure.
So I am a thriller, suspense, psychological horror fan.
Yeah. And so, when you sort of came to this project, had you, in terms of what you had directed previously to this, I mean, because this was such a strange kind of hybrid, I suppose, of genres, I mean, what sort of background had you come from at this point?
Okay, well, I did start at art college and mucking around there with film. But directly prior to this, I did a thing called My Sister Wife, which was a psychological thriller with Mira Sile in the lead. And then directly before that, I did a 3-parter, Blood Rights, which was a thriller. So I was in that sort of genre. I was edging towards it, and I actually feel incredibly privileged that I had gone that way.
Yeah. What was, again, it sort of, we'll go into this in more depth, but it feels like it was very much ahead of its time. What was TV and BBC sort of drama like at this phase, as far as you can remember?
It was much more, drama altogether was much more, formulaic's too hard a word, but there was an accepted sense of drama in the sense that Ghostwatch didn't do anything like that at all. So you did feel there was a way, places to put the camera. There was sort of motivation to camera movements. There was a language, and there still is a language, but I'd never actually seen or been influenced by anything prior to Ghostwatch.
So what was how did sort of you come to the project? Tell us a little bit about sort of how you ended up directing Ghostwatch.
It was Ruth Baumgarten, the producer. She asked me if I'd like to read the script. I'd made Sister Wife with her, which was a great project, and we were in the dub. And she said, "I've got this project coming up. Would you like to read it?" And she knew that there was a bit of special effects. But I think this is where my art college background came in handy, because I wasn't afraid of effects. I'd done some animating at art college, so I was very sort of like comfortable with that.
When you found out that it was kind of what the project was and what the story was, was there always this idea that it was going to be done as this as real kind of live studio show, and it was going to have the sort of illusion that it was a real sort of TV show?
As soon as I read the script, I was riffing on ideas of reality. So there were vox pop. Yeah. So I remember talking to Ruth about how, and Stephen, how I'd love to bring in real people with real experiences. So immediately I was thinking, how do we blur the edges?
Yeah.
In reality, how do we blur the edges? And then also I just felt that we had to be strict with the language, because the language of live TV is incredibly clear. They put the cameras in, and they have the roving camera.
Yeah.
There was a language that was incredibly clear, and I wanted to be very purist with that. I actually did break the rules, but I did set some rules too.
Interesting. So was there ever a point very early on that this might have just been a very straight up drama about, this family being haunted by a spirit or anything like that?
I absolutely believe that Stephen wrote it in the spirit of a TV programme.
Right.
But it was knife edge whether we went like a dramatic version of it.
Yeah.
Because we came from film department and we were still on film. And we were quite pretentious about that. And film brings a whole different set of skills and ideas away from live TV. For a start, film doesn't employ the real moment. It doesn't employ real time, which is obviously a bonus. But in TV, you're stuck with real time. Not that we used it, but I mean that's the reality. If you've got 2 or 3 cameras going, you're passing from real time from one camera to another, and you don't compress time like you can in film, which is so we had to make that decision to leave that behind. And actually, Richard Brooke, who was exec producer, was really funny about it, because he said he was horrified when I said I really want to make it as TV makes it.
Interesting.
So, he just thought, why would we leave all that sophistication behind?
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's true. Because I mean, these days there's very TV is thought of alongside film, but I suppose back then there was quite a difference, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was quite, but partly because it wasn't. I mean, the resolution wasn't so. It was quite far behind. It was in the days, it was just coming out of the days when if you struck a match, you'd leave this massive, ugly trail across the screen. You're too young to remember.
No, I do. I mean, I actually kind of, it's funny, isn't it? Because now, I kind of think that looks quite cool now when you get, sort of go back to old TV and you see that kind of effect. But
that's the 4x3 generation coming back.
Yes, exactly.
With added,
I've just
added
been
gunk.
Into this. I mean, did you, again, this movie has inspired so much, I think, since. But did you take any inspiration, any cinematic inspiration or anything like that?
Well, I knew it was it was horror genre, so I do remember watching Nightmare on Elm Street as my research for Ghostwatch, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I was really interested in the language of horror. Yeah. In terms of how you create tension. So I researched that, but it never occurred to me to think, oh, we're doing it never occurred to me to research. Well, I hadn't ever seen anything like Ghostwatch before anyway.
No.
So there wasn't anything to refer to, but it didn't actually occur to me to try and refer to anything either.
No, well, that's what. Yeah, I was so interested to, think of, were you thinking of this as a horror film, as a TV program, as a TV drama? What were you thinking of it in your head at this point?
Well, I must have been thinking along the horror genre, or else I wouldn't have, picked out some films to watch. I never. All my work on TV. I'm not thinking TV drama. I'm thinking drama. Storytelling drama.
Sure. And I think that's it now, isn't it? People watch this movie now on they screen it. People watch it as a movie. That's the thing. I mean, it is now sort of thought of as a film,
which is great.
This footage was shot by parapsychologists investigating the case. Now you're about to see one of the incidents that have earned this house its reputation.
So tell me a little bit about the casting of it then. Again, Michael Parkinson. Is that somebody that you always sort of maybe had in mind from the early stages?
And Stephen Falk's very funny about this because to amuse himself, he used to write famous presenters every different draft.
Yeah.
But Michael Parkinson wasn't on any of those drafts.
Right.
But yes, it was definitely we wanted a household name. We wanted someone that people would recognise, but also Parkinson was the ultimate interviewer. I mean, he himself had an incredibly unique style of making people feel comfortable, getting the best out of people. And I think it was a massive coup that we got him.
And Sarah Green as well. Sarah Green is almost, as much our star, really, isn't she?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, she's had a theatrical background, so she was really, well, both of them were incredibly hooked into the concept of it. So she was totally intrigued by that and had her background in theatre. So she'd actually moved away from her roots and was happy to come back and explore performance.
So these guys, because obviously they were at the time sort of presenters, but they were keen to be involved then. They were keen to sort of throw themselves into it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Great stuff.
Let me fill you in on what's been happening here so far. Let's face it, there's violence at some time or another in every part of London, and this estate is no exception. But there are some days, and certainly nights, where Mrs. Early and her two daughters would rather be out on the street than right here within their own four walls. Let's go upstairs for a moment.
What were the biggest challenges in when you were filming it?
Do you know, it was a massive challenge from beginning to end. A massive technical exploration that I had never, it was... Every step of the way was like chiselling through rock at the BBC, but it was incredibly enjoyable. And I'm not trying to say that I wasn't supported at every step of the way, because I was. But there were, we came from film department, which only worked on 16mm film with film cameras, film lighting, and we stepped over into digits. Well, it wasn't even digits actually. I think it was just tape.
Yeah.
So it was pre-digital. It was, I suppose, technically analog. The program, as you know, is part in the studio and part in the house with an OB base manning the cameras. So we had a choice to go either studio or OB, but we couldn't cross over because there was demarcation. So Ruth and I went round to the OB guys, who were very, very comfortable with, royal weddings, cricket, etc. And then we went to the studio guys, who actually was slightly more versatile, because whatever happens in the studio happens in the studio. So they could slightly think around the edges a little bit more for our taste,
right?
Because we weren't a big event,
yes,
in that sense. So we had to make the decision. So we went with the studio guys, which meant we fell foul of some odd things, like we had to virtually borrow an OB base that was completely unmanned, that the studio guys had to sort of plug up and pretend that it was working, but it wasn't working at all. Out the back was this tiny white van, which was stuffed full of BBC equipment. I mean, which is sort of, it was quite odd. And then, because we were taking all the rushes, as it were, all the feeds back to the cutting room as we would a film, that was completely unheard of, because usually in the studio it would go into a sort of package, and then you would take those scenes, cut scenes or whatever, and work that. So we didn't do any of that. So they're like tape everywhere, and everybody. It was great. I had to have a meeting every week. They'd say, "We need another meeting."
Yes.
And we need another meeting because we don't know what, we don't know. We've never done this before. Is this what you want? And we just basically go through it week by week.
Yeah.
But everything was. All I could hear was people saying, "We've never done this before."
It's great, yeah.
Which was fantastic.
Must have been great fun for everyone, especially if you have people who are crew and people like that who are used to television and just those very straightforward studio, suddenly doing something as kind of fun and inventive as this. It must have been great fun for everyone.
Yeah, and nobody said we can't do it. They just said we've never done it before. And also they had these guys with hundreds of degrees in the cellar who were actually working on Ghostwatch, putting together little packages of.
It's amazing.
It was wonderful. It was
amazing.
really, really privileged.
Fantastic. And again, you get it so right, the kind of style, the aesthetic of just a BBC kind of studio setup with everything in the studio, and also that kind of news footagey following Sarah around. Again, just visually it looks so authentic. I mean, again, was that something that you had to kind of do a bit of research into? Was that something that came very naturally to you, sort of reinventing that TV style?
Well, to be honest, didn't reinvent that bit. I mean, there was a lot of Annika Rice running up and down hills in those days.
Yes, absolutely.
With white polystyrene cups and things, I seem to remember.
Yeah.
But there were things going on.
Sure, yeah.
So that was, and also once you've set the set cameras up into the house, that you know where you're going, and you've got your roving camera, then you can break your own rules. But that's the sort of language. So that the most difficult thing that wasn't so difficult. The most difficult thing was slightly entering someone else's head about how you would present a Saturday night live program where you don't really expect to see a ghost. It's just a bit of wallpaper.
So how you kind of deal with it,
and how you deal with it. So how you present that sort of not exactly. So that was a sort of knife edge thing where you were always. That was the hardest judgment call all the time.
Yeah,
all the time, and interesting because I was working with film people. Often we were too dramatic.
Yes, yeah.
So we'd always have to pull it. We all had to pull it back. We had a composer. He composed the front titles, and that was it.
Yeah,
we didn't have any other music.
Of course. Yeah, strip it away.
Yeah.
And what was it like directing somebody like Michael Parkinson, who was already established as well at this point, and directing him as an actor in your drama? What was that like, and how did he take to the direction? It was
really interesting. I mean, it was very interesting both from the real presenter's point of view and also from the actor's point of view. But to start with Michael Parkinson, he came into rehearsal, and he was very well versed in two styles of and one style was autocue, which was quite arch.
Yes.
When you hear people read the autocue, there's a rhythm.
Yes.
There's a presentation that nobody hides.
Absolutely.
And you can feel the roll of you can feel it roll down. So he had that style, and then he had completely natural, just talking to his best friend, which he was so brilliant at.
Yeah.
Type of style. And so obviously I wanted that, the very relaxed style. So what we did was we devised a way of getting of presenting. So he didn't actually. We'd learn points, and he would go through chunks and in his own way. So we adapted to him.
How did the BBC find this idea? And how involved were they sort of editorially, or were they happy to sort of let you guys make what you wanted to make?
That's a very interesting question, because in those days the chain of command was very short,
right.
Which I think is actually why exciting projects get made, because there's far less
layers of
of opinion, I suppose. Even the best will in the world.
Yeah.
So Ruth and Richard Brooke were, obviously incredibly excited about it. And then I think that was the end of the chain.
Yeah.
So it was really just the controller and Richard is documented in the documentary with Rich Lawden's made, Richard Brooke talks about how he tried endlessly to say, I've got this program, I think I just want to in the reviews before they had these I mean, I don't know the workings of the BBC at that level, but they talk about programs that they might think is controversial or worried about.
Yeah, sure.
So he did try to flag it up.
Do you believe in ghosts? Have you ever experienced anything of the like in your own house or anywhere?
I'd say no, but what was interesting was when I was interviewing, I suppose, or meeting people who had really had experiences, and were going to appear as Vox Pop in the programme. I absolutely believed every one of them. So in that sense, I was really intrigued about how honest and straight and relieved they were that someone's actually genuinely wanted to hear their story and what had happened to them. That sort of moved me in the sense people do have experiences.
I mean, it must have been a challenging thing to make, and at the time, were you ever worried that, oh God, this could fail spectacularly?
I worry about that every minute of the day, that I'm going to fail, but spectacularly. But, you do think, is this real? Does this feel good? Mm-hmm. Is it work? Does it feel like it's working? I mean, all of that, all the time. But I actually had no concept. Obviously, I mean, I have a massive respect for audiences, and in the same sense of, like, would I want to watch this? Yeah. Does it work for me?
Yeah.
Do I understand it? But I didn't. I think Ruth and Stephen had a much better global feel. Yeah. About how's this going to hit the world. Yeah. But I absolutely, you're in the moth in the carpet. You're just doing your thing. Yeah, yeah. And you want the carpet to be great, but the pattern to be great. But you're actually going just through each
bit by bit. Absolutely. Process, yeah. What was it? How was it when it was sort of approaching sort of broadcast? How was it marketed? Because you hear so many people now, my parents included, who said, no, it was treated like it was real. Did they ever say, this is a drama tonight on BBC? Or was it always treated like it was a genuine documentary?
I mean, the thing, I suppose the short answer is it wasn't marketed.
It was just on.
So we just sidestepped that. But Ruth, Ruth was very clear. I think she sent it to one critic. Mm-hmm. But didn't send it out at all, when everyone is usually desperate to get their programme reviewed. Yes. She sent it out to one person, who, I think it might have been Nancy Banks-Smith. But and then there was a bit in the radio TV Times, I think. Mm-hmm. But we kept it quite low. I think she purposely wanted to keep it quite low as opposed to tell lies. 2 days before it was broadcast, we did go back into the edit and put writer and actor credits on the front.
Yes. Do you remember where you were the night that it was broadcast? Did you watch it?
Well, yes, because we all went down. We were all invited. We were for sort of
party thing.
Yeah, party down in Chiswick somewhere.
Fantastic.
So we were all together.
Excellent.
Ruth was at the BBC running between the phone-ins.
Yes. So tell me, this is brilliant because obviously as part of the drama you have people phoning in. Yeah. But was that a genuine number then that people could call?
Yeah, definitely. That's almost immoral to put a number up and not. I mean, that's part of our process. Funny. Was that. We're going to have real people talking about their experiences. We're going to put up a number. We're going to man it. So we had a whole desk.
Brilliant. But is that not immoral, having a number that people, taking those calls?
No, they're proper parapsychologists.
Right, okay.
Who were properly talking to people.
It wasn't just some researcher.
No. It wasn't just somebody going, hi. Yeah. It was someone who, it was properly trained people who were happy to take the calls.
Right, so there was still this element of a live television program happening still in some areas,
Yeah, but I mean, we actually thought just in case. I mean, I was thinking in case people needed to speak rather than
sure,
trying to continue a conceit.
yes, sure.
The switchboard was jammed with complaints, reports that children were terrified, pregnant women had gone into labour, and intelligent people felt duped. Conversely, many of the 11 million who watched it thought it was a brilliant piece of television. Well, what was it? A treat or a dangerous trick?
What was the reaction like, and how long before you found out what that reaction was like that night when it was broadcast?
I can't remember. I mean, I suppose that the tabloids just kicked off in the following days.
Yeah.
I did get a phone call from Sarah Green saying she's been doorstepped and can she come over, and I was thinking, oh God, it's so untidy. But that's my reaction.
Yes.
I've got to clean the house now.
Yeah. But obviously the reaction was huge. People thought it was genuine, didn't they?
Well, they seem to think everything that was fake, it was genuine, it was obviously a drama, it was obviously wasn't. It was obviously a drama till halfway through, and then it wasn't. I mean, everybody thought hundreds. I can't actually understand. Everybody thought, whichever way it happens, they thought that. It was a bit of a mess.
But I guess that's the fun. That's the fun of it, isn't it? I think that's what it is. It's that thing where it sparked so much conversation. One person going, "No, of course it isn't real," or maybe this bit's real, or and that's, I guess, what's grown over the years. Is that sort of...
No, we never meant to fool the audience. We meant to create a good ghost story for Halloween. We wrote a screenplay, we rewrote it countless times, we invented this family, and we thought this would be the ideal contemporary setting for a modern ghost story.
But you didn't use actors, you used factual presenters. You meant people to be deceived.
We billed it as drama, and we surrounded the factual presenters with actors who had appeared that very week in some of the most popular programmes on television, like Casualty.
So tell me a little bit about afterwards then. I mean, have you seen its influence on cinema, television and other things since? Have you sort of gone, oh, there we go, that's...
Well, obviously Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity. And actually the director has actually cited it, hasn't he, as an influence?
Yes, I mean, he's been very kind to us in the sense that he obviously says he liked the programme, so that's good. And Blair Witch, I mean, I don't know if any of these guys saw Ghostwatch, but I think it was in the Zeitgeist, and I just think we got there before.
It's fantastic, yeah.
People.
It's there was such a boom, wasn't there, with Blair Witch and Paranormal Activity, of hundreds of these kind of films being made, these quote unquote sort of found footage.
Yeah.
And this kind of it's kind of the original found footage horror movie in a sense.
Well, we like to think. I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to say, but we can't remember anything before.
Yeah, and it's funny because what was it about this age as well? This sort of the 90s. This kind of I don't know. This sort of postmodern element coming into art, television, even in things like comedy, for example. If you look at the early 90s of things like The Day to Day or Alan Partridge or whatever, this kind of playing with the form, I suppose. I mean, was that something that was just sort of out there in the zeitgeist at this point?
I just, I so don't know. I mean, they did come up, they were 94 and 97, weren't they?
So
we
after.
were 92.
Yeah.
But, often these things are technically linked.
Yes.
When radio mics arrived, there was an awful lot of different sort of sound things going.
Yeah.
They are sometimes technically linked, and I keep wondering whether there's. But what was really interesting was that we were watching the news and the news about the Gulf War, and there was music on it, and I was appalled, because there was a subtext to the news, which seems to me a totally alien concept. Really, it should news shouldn't you shouldn't be swayed with news. News should be fact.
Right. Yeah.
And then also the other thing that we were watching, and I was a big influence on us, really, I suppose, on what we weren't going to do as well as what we were going to do. There was a program called 999, which was massively dramatised. So there was documentary stories of death, doom and disaster, of people having these awful accidents, like falling out of boats and having their heads cut off with propellers. And they would have blood in the water, they'd have cameras in the water, they'd do direct POV chasing and being run away.
Yes.
So it was highly dramatised, but it was factual stories.
Right.
And that was a huge key into if everyone who's so highly factual can go drama, Why can't we go the other way? But actually, that was absolutely one element we weren't going to use, because it was just the conceit got too layered. The idea that you're
right having what kind of drama within the drama, or reconstructions.
Well, having factual. Well, having drama dressed as factual, dressed as drama. It just blew my mind.
Yeah, so, too many layers. Yeah. and was there ever a temptation when you were in the edit to drama it up a bit, to add in some music, to whatever?
No, definitely not add music. No, it was always stripping back. Was always stripping back.
And how often have you gone back and revisited Ghostwatch over the years since?
What, actually watched it from beginning to end?
Yeah.
Not that often, funnily enough. Once here with Michael Parkinson at the BFI, when they did some sort of retrospective on ghosts on TV, I think. Yeah. Which was a massive validation after we'd been kept in the dark for 10 years, because we were we were very underground for 10 years.
Really? Yeah.
So that was great.
Because as far as I'm aware, it's never been repeated on television, has it?
No.
And obviously last year, it was the 25th? Yeah, 2017. Last year was the 25th anniversary as well. So I know there were a lot of things going on around Halloween for Ghostwatch around then. Did you sort of revisit it at any point then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I watched it because Pilot Light TV Festival invited us up. They showed it, and we did a Q&A, and then they brought it back down to London as well. So that was really nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And how do you think it holds up now?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because I really think you should ask other people.
Yeah, of course.
But there are two audiences.
Yeah.
There's the audience who saw it at first time round, who have a completely different reaction, I think, to the audience who see it now.
Yeah.
But I like to think that the audiences now still get drawn in, I like to think.
Yes. Well, I personally was, I was born in 87, so I was 5 when this was out. So I didn't watch it originally, and I had heard the hype before I watched it, and I watched it and I loved it. And for me, it was just a brilliant, 90-minute horror movie or horror drama or whatever, and that's it. And it's the same with Blair Witch and all those things, isn't it? I think, you hear some people go, oh, well, when it was much scarier if you thought it was real. And I'm sure it was, but also I think it needs to work as a just regardless of that, I suppose, more than just a hoax.
Yeah. No, definitely.
When you've watched it again with audiences, were you aware that there were audience members seeing it for the first time?
Well, we usually ask if we're there. We usually ask who's seen it before.
Yeah.
And with Manchester, it was I would have said it was 90%.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, but we have seen it. We have been to Q&A when it's probably split 50-50 or even less. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Have you been in? Did you watch Paranormal Activity?
Yes.
What did you think of it?
No, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. It's a great idea.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love the fact that it's an unseen. The unseen thing is really, I think it's fantastic. Because horror, when at the time Ghostwatch, I remember being very clearly thinking that the anticipation was so much worse than whatever was cooked up.
Yes.
And that was definitely a feeling I took into Ghostwatch.
Yes.
Was that not being able to see it properly and not being able to encounter it properly is scarier than the rhythm of a horror story, where it's all, the first half's brilliant and then they reveal it and you think that's great prosthetics, but
absolutely,
or I can see the art direction. The artifice kills it.
Yeah, you're so right. And often it's never quite as scary as you imagine something to be in your mind.
Fear is all about the unknown. As soon as you know it, you pick it apart.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But actually, the sound design is very key, isn't it? I mean, there's fantastic sound design in Ghostwatch. I mean, that must have been something that a lot of work went into as well, did it?
Oh, it's great you said that, because it was with Win Rider. We got him out of retirement.
Yeah,
he was David Lean's sound designer. So,
oh wow, I didn't know that.
Fantastic. Yeah, we were really thrilled. So he was in his dotage and brought in a whole load of sort of really antiquated methods, but it's all to do with imagination and the head.
Yes.
So he was working from an era when equipment was so heavy, you brought all the sounds into the studio and found them. So he was like rubbing balloons and playing it backwards,
Yes,
and
yes.
symbols and stuff, and it was brilliant to see him work. Yeah,
Love that. That's brilliant, because it's that balance, isn't it, of making it sort of otherworldly, but also very much worldly. Very much kind of, these are noises you could hear in your house, I suppose. That's the thing. And are you kind of a fan of? It sounds as though you're a fan of the more sort of stripped back horror then, as opposed to the graphic, gory stuff. So I mean, because again, the sort of ghost movies are the best for that, I think, aren't they? They're so good for ambience and setup and holding back, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you had to have a favourite, do you have a favourite horror movie?
I don't know. I was trying to think about that. I mean, the things that have influenced me are, Jaws and Jewel, and as you say, stripped back, the really.
Yeah, God, Jewel is terrifying.
Yeah, Jewel was a bit of an eye opener for me as well, because it's so simple.
Yeah, it's just fantastic.
So simple, and I'm like, you can hardly blink.
No. Yeah, that is a true master there at the beginnings of a true master. Yeah. Brilliant. Leslie, thank you so much for joining me. It's been fantastic. What have you got? Is there anything you can tell me about what you've got coming up or what you've got going on at the moment?
Well, Stephen and I are, on the edges of our seat waiting for this film.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can tell me about it, or is it too early?
Well, it's called Extrasensory. And it's sci-fi.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. And that's it. Fantastic. Well, I can't wait. I'm sure everyone will be very excited. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's all a pleasure.
A big thank you there to the brilliant Lesley Manning. So wonderful to sit down and speak to her about Ghostwatch. But now it's time for us to review it, to get into the nitty-gritty and discuss the movie in spoilerific detail. So joining me to discuss all things Ghostwatch, he's been on the podcast before. He hosts the Heat Unmissables podcast. He's also TV and film critic for Heat magazine. He does everything. He's everywhere. He's the brilliant Boyd Hilton. Welcome, Boyd.
Thank you, Mike.
It's good to have you back.
It's a joy to be back on the world's greatest horror podcast.
Oh,
I've decided to call it this week.
I am going to use that a lot. So
I mean, what do I know?
Yeah, that's good enough for me. That's perfect. Can I basically say then that Heat magazine said that I'm the world's greatest horror podcast?
Without
yes,
doubt.
amazing. Good to know. Cool. So what we're doing this week, obviously we've been talking, last time you were here we were talking about slashers. We did Brian De Palma. This year we're kind of doing stuff on the other end of the spectrum, so these kind of ghostly haunted movies. But what's your opinion on these types of movies, ghost movies?
Yeah,
that kind of thing?
You know what struck me actually? I was listening to your very fine first episode of this series.
Oh yeah. With Andy Nyman.
With Andy Nyman, the lovely Andy Nyman, who I do know a little bit. I bump into him a lot in town, and
he's nice.
We have a little stop and chat every time I see him, and he's very nice.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about what your favourite ghost-based films are.
Yes.
And you said The Shining.
Yes.
And you said, and you kind of were slightly doubtful whether it even is a ghost story. Now, of course, the interesting thing about the ghost-based genre is that a lot of films that are ghost stories, you don't know they are until right at the end.
Exactly.
And there's loads of films where the twist is the fact that it's a ghost story.
Yes.
So in a way, and I love a lot of those films. A lot of those films are great. But I think so. That's why I like it. Really, I love a film with a good narrative twist, and often that is in the ghost story genre.
Absolutely.
They're ghosts.
We'll be talking about The Sixth Sense actually at some point as
there
well.
You go.
Which
the
is
classic,
the
all-time classic.
And The Others is one of my all-time favourites as well.
Fantastic!
They have those brilliant kind of misdirection moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the really nice thing about ghosts as well, is that. In this series, we're sort of branching out into television and also theatre, like The Woman in Black and stuff like that, and ghost stories. And we've talked at length about those old sort of 70s BBC ghost stories. Yes. So the M.R. James ones, Whistle and I'll Come to You, and also things like the Stone Tape, the Nigel Neal, that kind of stuff. I mean, are you a fan of all that sort of things?
I love those. And I mean, I was a bit, I think, again mentioned on the Andy Nyman thing, or maybe it was somewhere else, the series Thriller.
Yes,
which had a lot of ghost stories among it in my memory. I watch Thriller every single week. I mean, as I said last time, I'm very old. Yeah. So that I grew up watching that stuff. So in the mid-70s, there were a lot of horror series on TV, way more than there are now. Monsters was another, Monsters.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Which was absolutely terrifying to me.
Yeah.
I think Andy Nyman mentioned it again.
Yeah.
I think me and Andy Nyman, I think we're maybe roughly, I don't know, I'm probably
Same
older
age.
than him. I'm older, I'm sure. But we have a similar middle-class Jewish background. And I think... And we watched a lot of TV, and I like to think, I mean, he's the really talented one, and I'm just a TV and film critic. But that stuff had an indelible effect on me. Those thriller monsters, and I think a couple of other as we call them, anthology portmanteau. It's totally different story every week, but they had a really dark, horrible, scary tone to them. Tales Unexpected was kind of different, but those others were hardcore horror most weeks, and a lot of them were brilliant ghost stories. On top of the M.R. James thing.
Why? Well, I mean, I just so wish there was more of that kind of stuff now. You know,
I guess Black Mirror is
our closest.
Inside Number 9.
Yeah,
they have. I mean, Inside Number 9. There's one coming out which hasn't gone out. It'll probably have gone out by the time this episode goes out. That really is a horror episode.
Excellent.
But that's slightly a spoiler, so I'm glad this will go out after it goes out.
Yes, exactly.
And they love their horror, don't they? They have elements. But I would love someone. Yes, there's definitely a gap, isn't there? Someone's got to do a full-on horror anthology series. Maybe we'll do it. We'll write it.
Yes, let's do it. Yeah. I mean, you've got Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story, haven't you? But
that's a whole series each year.
Yes,
it's a kind of anthology. It's a different story every year.
Yes,
across 10.
So it's a kind of long form anthology or something.
Yeah, which that's his thing, isn't it? Long form anthology thing, but a different story every week. I mean, it's so expensive, isn't it? That's why.
But
I still think someone would do it. Netflix would do it.
But yeah, I mean, this leads us on to, we're talking about one of the biggest sort of television horror stories of them all, really. So Ghostwatch, I mean, so I'm going to age us both here a bit, aren't I? But I wasn't old enough to watch this when it first came out, but I heard all about it from everyone.
Did you?
I remember hearing about it even when I was young. I had older sisters who told me about it, and I mean, so tell me, did you watch this when it was first broadcast?
Yes, I did. And the funny thing is, when you asked me to do this episode, and you said, have you seen Ghostwatch? And I was thinking, I think I have. And I certainly would know the full story of it. And so you never know, because it is so long ago, 1992.
Yeah, 25
years ago. Yeah. So I was slightly down. And then as soon as I started watching it again.
Yeah.
I remember it so vividly, everything about it, and then it was just, I absolutely did watch it when it went out in 1992. Yeah.
Amazing,
I thought, and I remember thinking, it's pretty good then, but I think I kind of underappreciated it at the time.
Yeah,
and then it became this big thing, controversial thing, and there were, BBC wouldn't let it be shown, and there were complaints and all of that. I remember thinking the complaints were really stupid.
I mean, it's hilarious. It's still never been repeated ever.
That
is what Lesley Manning was saying.
Yeah. Even on BBC 4, you'd think BBC 4 would want to show it again.
I mean, the crazy thing is that obviously they just set out to make a fun, interesting drama that was a bit clever. Yeah. But I think what happened was a lot of people thought it was real, didn't they? That's the thing.
It's the same thing that happened with War of the Worlds, wasn't it? Orson Welles' War of the Worlds.
It's basically that, isn't it?
Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Oh, Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns, the gas tanks for the automobiles, spreading everywhere. Coming this way now, about 20 yards.
He did not intend it to be, I do believe, I should have checked before, but I don't think he intended it to be a complete, to fool people into
thinking there was like a prank.
Yeah, it wasn't a prank, intended to fool the American public into thinking there were invading aliens, but he just did it in such a documentary style, and such effectively, really, the people tuning in, missing the very beginning, thought it was real. And similarly this, because what I did remember was that it was part of a weekly series of dramas, of one-off dramas.
Yes, called Screen One, I think it was. Yeah,
exactly. So, everyone who was vaguely aware of how television worked at that time knew tonight is the next Screen One, and it was introduced that way on TV. So, again, it must have been people who tuned in the middle, switched over from somewhere else was on the other side, who were confused. And you can see that.
Now, on BBC One, Screen One presents an unusual and sometimes disturbing film marking Halloween. Using the modern idiom of the outside broadcast, Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith and Craig Charles star in Ghostwatch.
I think anyone who knew about TV knew that it was, and I didn't ever think it was real.
No, I was going to say, do you remember? No.
No, I remember it very vividly being, this is a very innovative, clever, and bold and brave attempt to do this thing, to keep it completely within this realm of a television program. Yeah. Within the Screen One drama system. I'm thinking, that's a brilliant thing to try and do.
Yeah, it's such a cool idea. Yeah. And, it's influenced since. I mean, we'll talk about that later, but the whole kind of found footage genre is basically got this to thank in a way.
Isn't it? And I don't know if whether you've managed to find anyone who will admit whether, like the director of those films.
Yeah, well, apparently,
Blair Witch, maybe?
Not Blair Witch, but Paranormal Activity.
Oh, okay.
The director of that has Lesley Manning said, he's been very good to us. He always cites us as his kind of inspiration.
So that's
good.
That's really good, because it really is. I don't remember there being a found footage thing as kind of that sticks to it as religiously as this does.
No, absolutely. And there's stuff that was a lot more niche. There was things like the really extreme cannibal Holocaust, which was all done like a documentary. Yeah. But who went and saw that other than hardcore kind of horror fans? So
and that was legendarily banned. That was one of the that was it the first or one of the main?
It was one of
video nasties.
It still remains, I think, one of the most disturbing kind of notorious films. I mean, it's really it's almost too well done where you think you're watching a snuff film, and that's the thing. And that the director was even prosecuted and taken to court and had to prove that the actors were still alive and that he wasn't shooting a snuff film, which I suppose just means that he made an incredible film. But
did a good job. And again, I think it's testament. I mean, funnily enough, the other example, there were people who Ricky Gervais always says it's a different genre. But when The Office first went on air, remember when he was completely unknown, people did think it was an actual documentary. A lot of people, and famously, I mean, one critic kind of did, and he denies it, but one critic kind of did think it didn't really get it. I think it's such a bold thing to do. You kind of kudos to everyone involved.
It's fascinating, and I was asking, Lesley Manning came from a directing drama background,
right?
Because I was kind of how do you think about this directing it? Are you directing it like you'd direct a Michael Parkinson Saturday night show, or are you directing it like a drama kind of thing? And how do you? And she used all of the crew, the people who worked in the studio, all the tech people, all the kind of outside broadcast people were all TV people that would do those types of shows. The Michael Parkinson studio show, or the on location kind of news stuff. Annika Rice kind of running after the presenter. But it's just that the writer and director at the helm of it had invented a story, basically. So it's really cool.
It's really cool, yeah. So Stephen Falk, he wrote it. Who was basically a writer of other supernatural. I think he wrote a series later, didn't he, with Leslie Sharp and Andrew Lincoln, which I really liked. So it's kind of his speciality. But I think I'm sure you spoke to Lesley about the director, but isn't it true that it was originally supposed to be a series?
Yes.
And then they thought it wouldn't work as a 6-part drama. So then they boiled it down to a one-off hour and a half feature-length thing, which I think is very much to its. I think it's worked. That worked really well. 100%. I couldn't see it working as a series.
No,
but you can see there's a story which almost by stealth. Works really well. Like at first, you're like, well, nothing much is happening. They do the nothing much is happening bit in the house that's supposed to be haunted.
Yeah, that's what makes it so real.
And then slowly and steadily, there is the story kind of develops without you even realizing it. Which I think is really clever.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's all that comes into it, and I think if it had been a series, it would have lost that, because there's that whole thing of like, it's running away with us. We've gone over. We've had to cancel the next show, and it's all very like immediate, isn't it? That's the thing. Brilliant. Let's just start from the beginning.
Yes.
Could you give us a little plot synopsis?
Yes. So everyone explain what the story is. So it was set on the 31st of October 1992.
Yes.
And the idea of it is that it's a special show. Hosted by Michael Parkinson, playing himself, with outside reporters, Sarah Green, stationed in a house. It's based on the Enfield haunting, isn't it? Which was, I think,
that's right. Yeah.
So there was this famous case of a house that was supposed to be haunted in Enfield, which was also the basis for one of the recent
Conjuring
films. There you go, and was also its own series on Sky.
Yes.
So this story has been told, interestingly, in myriad forms, myriad shows and films. But this one, so roughly based on that, the idea that in suburbia there's a house that's been haunted.
Yeah.
And it's basically a kind of exploration. Oh, is it really? And can we do a live TV show?
Yeah.
Where we visit the house, we tell the story of the family. There's a mother and 2 daughters, and there's stationed camera in the bedroom, which is where a lot of the ghostly appearances they say have taken place.
Yeah.
In the studio, you've got Michael Parkinson hosting it, playing himself, alongside an expert who is supposed to be an investigator into the paranormal.
Yes.
And she believes all of this has been happening. And she's visited the family and interviewed them all. Yeah. And she's kind of got the background to the whole story. She's like Michael Parkinson's sidekick, if you like, in the studio. Sarah Green, as I say, in the house reporting on location, so to speak. Craig Charles,
Craig
also
Charles.
weirdly, randomly, and I thought that's very clever because he's kind of like the light relief.
Yes,
he's
the
comic
funny
relief.
guy. Yeah,
he's the funny guy roaming around, chatting to locals, and being a bit less serious than everyone else.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mike Smith, who was Sarah Green's actual proper husband.
Yes, that's right.
At the time. Also in the studio with doing manning the phones, so kind of roaming around, and people can call in with their horror stories, which they do use at the beginning, a couple of them.
That's amazing.
To add to the whole kind of tone of it, but it's absolutely religiously follows the idea that this is happening now, and it's a live broadcast on BBC One, hosted by these people, and they're all real people playing themselves, and you've got actors playing the family and the expert, and maybe the camera. I don't know whether you asked whether the cameramen are. There's lots of shots of the cameramen. They're very convincing cameramen. And to start with, and then to talk about that story that emerges slowly. To start with. Michael Parkinson's there, and he's cynical, and he's kind of, there's a little bit of a frisson of tension between him and the expert who believes in it all. There's another expert, in America, I love that little touch, the American guy who
brilliant.
comes in, who's the skeptic, who's very cynical and has a go at the woman who believes in it all. And then you slowly, at first it's nothing much is happening, then there's a brilliant bit where one of the girls fakes a moment, and then it all thinks, it's all going to be fake,
and it's all over,
and you think that's going to be the big reveal that it's all fake. But then it really smartly, in the final act, if you like, the final kind of third, I guess, then it all gets quite genuinely scary and really terrifying things start happening.
It's amazingly paced, actually. It feels so real because to begin with, it really feels like one of those programs where it's like, okay, nothing, they're just killing time,
Exactly, and I wonder if how would that have worked in the 6-part version? I'm intrigued to know how it would have, whether if in the 6-part version, I remember reading actually, I'm pretty sure that it was going to be. The final episode was going to be this, wasn't it? I think that's how it would work. So I think in the initial, in the series version, it would have been, I guess, a regular drama, and then finally it would have been
this family or whatever.
About this family, and then it would have been an interesting way of ending it, if you like. I think I'm right in saying that.
Well, that's it. I think that in his head, Stephen Volk had this whole mythology about this character of Pipes and what he was, and I suppose actually very little of that is really revealed, isn't it? That's the thing. So he probably had more to it,
right? As you say. So the ghostly presence is known as Pipes. And why is it known as Pipes? I've forgotten why.
Well, I think it's just because he makes the noises in the pipes or something.
And you see little glimpses of him, and then in the middle and towards the end, people start phoning up with their version of his backstory, if you like, explaining, and it gets really dark,
really disturbing.
And again, I don't know if they could do this now.
I'm shocked they did it then. To be honest,
the two things that we're talking about are that the ghost is supposed to be some kind of pervert, basically, criminal, imprisoned child molester, and there are children in peril in this show. And in fact, one of them, the teenage girl, has these scratches on her face. Is one of the big things, and that is genuinely horrific. And I don't think now. I think the BBC would be bold if they tried to do this.
Oh,
now. Maybe that's another reason maybe why it hasn't been shown. I mean, it is obviously on the mainstream channel. It's pretty bold and daring.
It's amazing.
To have that reveal that the ghostly figure is an apparition of a horrendous criminal who preyed on children, and to have children in peril in that context. That's bold.
I mean, it's a little bit Freddy Krueger-esque. And Lesley Manning actually said, I watched Nightmare on Elm Street before. She said she didn't know much about horror films, and she thought, I better watch Nightmare on Elm Street before doing this, because at the time it was quite big. And I suppose there's that thing of a kind of slashing child molester is a little bit. But that, and then there's that whole story about how he hung himself, did he? Or he hangs himself and the cats eat his face or something under the stairs. I mean, it's really horrific.
It's bleak, because there's that great... I guess you've got one of the key things in a lot of ghosts is the kind of door, what's behind the door, and there's a great what's behind the
glory hole that they keep mentioning.
Calling it the glory hole, which is extraordinary, is under the stairs. The boarded up initially kind of room leads to, I guess, a basement. We don't really know. It's not really. They explain why
locked up
for weird reasons, and that is very, very scary. The way they take all the take the wood off and they unlock it, and Sarah Green goes in
Yeah.
to find out what the hell is down there. That is very, very cleverly done.
Yeah, that is proper horror territory, isn't it? It's kind of slowly, gradually becomes this proper genre movie, doesn't it? Which is what's so clever about it. And actually, talking about the cast, Michael Parkinson is very good.
I mean, this is the extraordinary thing about it. Because one of my big bugbears about famous people playing themselves is mostly they're terrible as themselves.
Yes.
And you even get, I'm even thinking of actors who may appear in shows as themselves sometimes. And sometimes you think, it's a bit. You're more convincing when you're playing other people.
Yeah.
Presenters doing it. I mean, that is. But I think they're all really good. I think so. My one slight, if I'm being really picky, my one slight criticism of the show, is that I think Parkinson's brilliant. I think Sarah Green's extraordinary.
Yeah.
I think, for example, and I hope she's not. I mean, I don't know where she is, but the actress who plays the expert.
Yes,
is actorly. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. 100%.
She's not real.
Too dramatic.
She's
almost.
too dramatic.
Yes.
Right.
Oh, come on, Doctor, please. We surely got to accept we saw it there.
Look, this is an established pattern. Genuine phenomena followed by the fakery stage when the children feel obliged to come up with the goods.
Doctor, really?
I'm sorry, because...
Well, I mean, after 8 months of commitment and committed work like you've been through, I can understand that you feel upset because you've been duped.
I'd be the first to admit it if I was absolutely sure I had been duped.
Oh, Doctor, really?
Oh, please don't be simplistic. This is one incident amongst many, many dozens. I was there. I've seen them. I've seen inexplicable things. 100%, no question.
And I remember thinking this at the time. So when I rewatched it, I'm thinking, that was probably the thing that I thought it wasn't that great, because I think just that when it gets testy between her and Michael Parkinson and the expert in America, that feels a bit unreal. That's the most unreal element of the whole thing to me.
100%.
Because I don't think in a real equivalent, if you're being really strict, I can't imagine if it was a real show, I just think what she ends up doing and how she ends up behaving, she gets really snotty and angry.
Yeah,
it feels a bit too much, and I think her. So I'm being harsh on her. It may, but. The rest of it, but Parkinson's absolutely brilliant.
It's amazing.
Totally seamless. Like, it's just him.
He even captures that slightly annoying arrogantness that he has.
Right,
that we all know he has a bit of. And he even must be so aware of it himself, I think. The way he kind of prods and pushes her and gets angry with her.
Absolutely, and every step of the way. At the beginning, when he doesn't think much is happening, when there is nothing happening, effectively, he's a little bit irritated, and that's brilliant. Then he gets irritated by her.
Yeah.
Then when the little girl, the teenage girl, does something in the house that is not real, she makes her own noise.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's all going to be fake. Then he gets angry about that and wants to quit. And that's genius. He's so good at that. And then in the end, he has to get really frightened.
Yeah.
With the studio, and that I have to say, absolutely the masterstroke of the studio itself being haunted.
Yes, amazing.
It's so clever. And he has to really... It's demanding acting. He has to do it that. Sarah Green even more so. I mean, she's brilliant as well.
Yeah.
And there are moments when she's a little bit stilted, but it seems real, because actually a presenter in that situation would be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's
so
got almost like a kind of awkwardness to it that is real, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
All of that works really well. Even Mike Smith's concerned that his wife, his poor wife, is in peril.
Yeah.
All of those people, I think, Craig Charles, absolutely convincing.
Yeah.
So I think that's why those people who did think it was real, it must have been so... I can absolutely see that they're so good, the real presenters. Yeah. And it doesn't feel scripted at all, their stuff.
No.
Parkinson's stuff doesn't feel scripted. I don't know whether any of it was improvised.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think, she did say that, what Parkinson has that he's so good at is when he reads an auto cue and he sounds very presently and it sounds very staged. But then when he interviews somebody, he always makes it sound so natural.
Yes.
And I wonder if she didn't say specifically whether or not it was a word for word script, or whether they just sort of said to Michael, this is what you would ask on a talk show.
Funny enough, I interviewed Michael Parkinson a few years ago, towards the end of his kind of regular career when he moved to ITV, his last series on ITV.
Yeah.
So I interviewed him.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But no pressure. God, interviewing the biggest interviewer, in the world.
But he was absolutely brilliant. And I did ask him about the show.
Yeah, did you? Yeah.
Very briefly. So I said, how, you know, what an amazing thing to do. You did that Ghostwatch thing.
Yeah.
I didn't ask him about the improvisation thing, and I really wish I had, because now I'm fascinated watching it back.
Yeah.
But he was very proud of it.
Yeah.
He was really proud of it, and he thought it was an incredible thing.
That's
So he was definitely aware that, I mean, he wasn't boasting, but I mean, I meant more, you know, I said to him, as I would, you know, kind of in a slightly crawly way, you were incredible in it, you know, playing yourself. And he's like, oh, you know, well, we all, yeah, it was a really interesting thing to do, and we were really proud of it. And that was about the sum of, because I was supposed to ask him about the stuff.
Yeah.
But quite rightly, what absolutely brilliant performance.
Yeah.
And as I say, by all of them, and Sarah Green particularly,
I think she's the best.
Because she has to run the gamut.
Yeah.
Of kind of, she has to look after the little kid when it gets really scary towards the end. She does all that stuff really well. She has to do the stuff where she's trying to work. She should go back to the studio, and she's, and just being absolutely shit scared.
Yeah, exactly.
It's difficult. To do
Yeah,
that stuff.
exactly. There's kind of layers of what she's doing, because she's kind of scared but trying to hold it together and trying to look professional, try and be a presenter whilst also being in this situation. It's great.
Incredible noises coming from the walls and from the ceiling. Oh, Jesus. Kimmy! Kim! Can't you do something?
It is great, and I think what it's easy to forget, and what I remembered from rewatching is that, of course, her and Mike Smith were kids' TV presenters. You know, she was
going live.
Going live again adds another layer of daring to it.
Yeah,
that she's dealing with this really bleak, dark story involving children in peril. Yeah, and she's a kids' TV presenter.
It's true, and actually, she would have been about this time, wouldn't she? That was, I remember, like peak Sarah Green. Yeah,
it was peak Sarah Green. Yeah, absolutely. That's what she did. That was what she was most famous for. That's and then she's doing this really, really horrible thing. And that again, even though I was disparaging people who did think it wasn't, who did think it was real, rather, who didn't realise it was a drama. The more I think about it, I think they're actually, if you just ignore the female expert character and focus on the Sarah Green thing, God, it must have been like disturbing and shocking, and no wonder people complained about it.
Yeah, she was. Lesley Manning said they all watched it together, cast and crew, on like a screening night.
Right.
They didn't really know how big a deal. Obviously, there was no internet then. You couldn't get instantly what people thought of it.
Yeah.
But they did say that the really fascinating thing is that, obviously they had the number come up where you could call, and obviously
which was
all the
a real
calls,
number, right?
Yes, it was a real number. All the calls that were coming in weren't real and live, obviously, because this was all pre-made.
Yeah.
But they had to actually have a phone line open because they had put that number across.
Yes.
So they actually had these like parapsychologists that they hired, these experts who would just listen to people's experiences.
Wow.
And they did say the phone had been going mental, apparently. That was the only kind of indication
I bet.
that maybe this has caused a big wave.
And I have no idea with it, but in my memory, that I'm sure it was dealt with on a points of view style show or something that went out at the time. Where people were complaining about it.
Right.
I'm sure it was dealt with. I remember it being a thing for a while.
I'm sure
people were angry about it, and I remember. I thought those people were stupid, but it's a tribute to how effective and brilliantly done it was. There was that outcry.
It's just one of those things, isn't it? It's like when Blair Witch came out as well, and there was that kind of initial, oh, it's incredible, and then there was this backlash because people were like, oh, it's all fake or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't really get that, because I just think, aside from all that, just on its own as a piece of cinema, it's brilliant. And same with Ghostwatch. I just think, I watched it as an adult a few weeks ago for the first time, knowing everything about it, about the hype, everything. It still got under my skin.
Yeah, right.
I still thought it was compelling.
Yeah.
Even when nothing was happening, it's just fascinating as well. You're watching all these presenters play themselves. And
completely.
I just kept thinking, God, this is, when it opens and that first shot is those two little girls asleep on the sort of night vision camera, I'm like, well, this is just paranormal activity. It's amazing how ahead of its time it was.
But I think it's better than Paranormal.
Yes.
I mean, the first Paranormal Activity is really good, isn't it? I think I might have given up after. There have been 4, maybe 5?
I think even more. More. I think I gave up after 4.
Yeah, but I remember the original being really effective.
Yeah.
And that was a proper kind of word of mouth thing, wasn't it? It was tiny budget, shown in one of the festivals first, and it was and it absolutely worked.
Yeah.
But I think this is even better because I feel that it's a much more, like, I think in a way, you're watching found footage on Paranormal Activity, and you're kind of like, you have to ease your way into that notion.
Yes.
Whereas this, because it completely adopts the format.
Yes, it's
of
like
a one-off TV show.
Yeah, exactly.
You're immediately kind of the suspension of disbelief. It's absolutely immediate.
Yes.
And even though you've got that character I keep complaining about, you're right. It's so, the storytelling is so effective.
Yes.
And the character, it's all so well done and so rigidly sticks to, uncompromisingly sticks to the format.
Yes,
that's the key.
Yes,
and I know that, and I feel that. I mean, I'm not sure if this is fair, but I feel like a lot of found footage, Blair Witch again, I think feels very sticks completely authentically.
Yeah.
But since then, I feel a lot of found footage. You think, oh, well, that's clearly being edited.
Yes,
rock back. But this, again, every single step of it, and I'm sure it's great that Lesley was saying she saw no one else, but none of it feels like it's trying to be a horror drama in any way.
I know,
even when it's so clever the way that's done. I mean, I can't speak too highly of it. I think
it's incredible. And Lesley said actually she finds it irritating when she watches the types of found footage films, or actually she even used The Truman Show as an example, where it starts off and it's like you're seeing everything from the cameras that are supposed to be the cameras that are fixed, and then she said there was a moment when it suddenly just cut away from that and suddenly we see whatever, the people in the gallery or whatever, and she said why it shouldn't have given up, never lost it kind of thing. And that's what she was so keen to do with Ghostwatch, never ever break away from.
And again, that goes back to the Office comparison, because Gervais was very absolute, and Stephen Merchant, they rigidly stuck to a proper document. They would never show anything that the film crew wouldn't be filming, and in the way they would be filming it.
Yeah.
And a lot of these faux documentary comedies since then don't stick to that at all.
No, that's it.
And it's that uncompromising sticking to the format that is so key.
No, and that is the big problem with found footage movies, I think, is that the worst ones are always the ones where it's like they can't come up with a good reason as to why this character is still filming something. You're being chased by some sort of monster. Why are you still are you still running your video camera?
Yeah, why exactly? Oh yeah, that's what I meant. It's the why are we watching this thing?
Yeah.
Why has it been filmed? And this hasn't got that.
The lines are still open, and we've got time for just one other call, I think. No, in fact, we haven't. I'm sorry, apparently we've got to go straight back to Foxhill Drive, where things are happening. Sarah.
From in here, wasn't it?
I think for so many reasons, this is so much more real than most found footage movies. And I think it's not just the fact that the conceit is believable, that they've set up cameras in order to see the ghost, and that's why they're still filming. But it's also just the way that it's paced, It's actually quite slow. The first hour, I would say, is a lot of killing time, as a lot of these programs actually would be if they were waiting live on television to see evidence of a ghost. There's a lot of, okay, let's go over to the phone line now. Okay, let's talk to this scientist. Let's talk to this parapsychologist. Let's do some vox pops outside. Sarah Green kind of killing time and playing with the kids. There's a lot of kind of padding where I can imagine if you were watching this, you would be kind of lulled in because you think, okay, yeah, they're not going to see anything live on television. And then it starts to escalate.
It's moved.
It's in the wardrobe.
It's out the way. Can you hear this?
And of course, you've got that brilliant sort of climactic moment about an hour in where you start hearing all of the noises, all of the bumps going on upstairs. Sarah Green hears it. She goes upstairs with the cameraman. The little girl is missing. And of course, we've already been told that there's this ghost called Pipes, who is this kind of evil entity. And just the whole idea of Pipes is brilliant because it's very relatable. We all have in our own homes, strange noises that might occur. And they usually do come from the pipes or something similar. So to take that idea and make it some sort of demonic entity is a great idea because it brings that fear into your own home.
Suzanne must still be in the bedroom.
But where?
The camera range, right in the corner of the room. Can we cut to the hall camera? No, sorry, the landing camera. No, the landing on the door, the other landing. That's it, and zoom in. Can we pan? Can we pan left? And down.
But just as the tension builds and builds and builds, we then get the letdown of, okay, it was all a hoax. It was the little girl making that noise. She was doing it to try and make them believe that what was happening in the house was real.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So again, there's that kind of moment when the tension is then let down and Michael Parkinson is kind of rolling his eyes going, okay, well, it was all the little girl after all that, And it's a brilliant idea because it kind of emphasizes even more that this is real, what we're watching, that actually, you know, if you did set up cameras to see ghosts, it would be just a massive letdown. It would all be fake. It would all be a hoax. So you reach the kind of hour mark and you think, okay, there was nothing to be scared of after all. It was just a hoax. And then it happens for real. And by that point, everyone is so lulled in that when stuff actually starts happening in that final act and then it reaches the studio, you're left absolutely on the edge of your seat. And it's so perfectly paced.
This is just a cover. It's a dupe.
But
this isn't happening now.
But what is?
I think only like BBC 4 could do this now.
Yes,
because
yes.
I think you know, BBC 4 that revels in, like, they have actual slow TV shows, which like watching trains going by and all those things. But it is very slow. I mean, obviously completely deliberately. The first, I say, like, you know, half hour, 3/4 of an hour, whatever, nothing is happening. That's the whole point of it. But it makes what eventually happens so much more effective because of that, because it feels so much more real and you're being lulled into this full sense of security. And I also think it's interesting, a whole thing about the ghost genre that I'm sure you're exploring in the whole series is, and this is an absolute classic example of it, you don't need to see hardly anything.
Oh, well, this is the other thing.
You need hardly any actual vivid, brutal, you know, unlike the slashers where you're literally waiting for the next kill.
Yes.
And for it to be as gory and horrendous as possible. And that's part of the whole design of that genre.
Yeah.
In ghost stories generally, I think, often, it's, I mean, like, for example, a lot of, you know, I'm sure a lot of the, maybe the others, for example, must have been like a 12, maybe.
Absolutely.
Not, you know, like, these are not much horrible, gory stuff. It needs to happen at all. And in fact, if it does, it maybe even ruin it.
Yeah.
But this ghost stories thing, nothing.
No.
Anything. The scariest thing you see is the marks on the girl's face.
Yes,
really.
Exactly.
That's
and it's all what you don't see, and it's all what's implied. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's so effective. Yeah. And I guess that is. I mean, The Shining, I guess, is another. He pretty much fills The Shining with as many horrendous images as you can.
Yeah,
there is gallons of blood coming out of the
lift. There's blood. There's axe. There are slasher elements. There's almost zombie elements with that woman in the bath. There's like everything.
That's true, But this is an example of how you don't need to see hardly anything.
100%.
Going into the dark space. And
it's the dark spaces. It's the night vision.
The little kind of. Moments like that, she turns the tap on. Sarah Green turns the tap on in the house, and too much water comes out.
Yeah,
even that is scary. That's so clever. You know, just a tiny little thing, and later on it starts running on its own.
Yes,
and that's one of the little supernatural things. But that's brilliant.
It.
You know, that's great writing. By Stephen Fowler.
Tiny little details, and a lot of it does. As I say, watching it, even though there are moments where the tone of it, I guess, especially the ending when. It's clear that the studio was it the expert, the woman who's the expert says it's like a seance, isn't it? The whole country's in a seance, brilliant.
Which is a great
and suddenly
line.
It brings the viewer into it. You're part of it.
That's a great explanation. And then these things start happening in the studio, and I remember thinking, oh, that's a bit like these. That's very much in the thriller genre of that series,
right?
Just that moment, and watching it all shot on video. All those things used to be shot on video as well. Which was again, Inside Number 9 did a big tribute to that in that Christmas episode.
That's my favourite.
All that stuff. You know, everything. When you grew up watching stuff in the 70s and late 70s and 80s, everything was filmed on video, and it has that.
Lesley Manning used the example of you couldn't film a candle without it creating a kind of trail, an orange trail,
exactly.
You know, all that kind of thing. Yeah.
And at the time you thought. And I remember thinking at the time, because all American stuff looked like it was filmed on film.
Yes.
And that seems so much more sophisticated.
Yes.
But there's something, I think, when you try and be scary using that format, as the League of Gentlemen episode showed, it's something incredible. It works really, really well.
It works so well. It just straddles both mediums so perfectly, doesn't it? Because, you know, you could look at it as a basic, you know, horror movie, and it's like you've got, you know, Michael Parkinson could be that kind of Tales of the Crypt narrator figure who sits by the fire and tells you, and it's like Sarah Green is like this kind of final girl type character, and you've got the kind of funny Craig Charles who's kind of the sort of laddie jockish one or whatever, you know, and you've got these kind of characters in distress and a villain, and you know, and the skeptic and the believer.
Absolutely.
You've got the seance, you've got the medium, you know, it's a classic kind of horror ghost story. guy just dressed up.
Yeah, and in Ghost Stories, in Andy Nyman's film, I never saw the stage play, but in the film, he's making a guy who makes shows about where he doubts,
debunks
Ghost Stories, and I get that, and that influence of this must be there on him, because again, this he could have been the kind of one of the reporters roaming around in this thing, that character.
I'm sure it was a big influence on all those guys. I've heard Reece Shearsmith talk about it and loving it, and I mean, it's brilliant. And also I do love that ending, that thing where it's like, and it is kind of silly, but it's a brilliant idea, the way that it's working, it's coming through the studio, and it's using the technology.
Oh, it's great.
And therefore we're all involved, and it kind of leaves it on that kind of, oh shit, it might be in your living room kind of thing.
It's very, very clever, and it's a little bit, that does feel very Quatermass. I remember that, very Nigel Neal, a little bit Doctor Who as well. I think
very Doctor Who.
Some of the Rusty Davis Doctor Who's tried that idea of, of something going through your television sets. But because it works so well, because we're watching this thing play out in a studio, and to once the studio starts itself experiencing poltergeist activity, it's really terrifying.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it has that element we've just talked about a few weeks ago, actually, about those kind of very old, silly William Castle ghost movies like House on Haunted Hill and that kind of thing, where they used to have like electrodes in the seats, or like skeletons flying over the audience, or whatever, silly kind of 3D and stuff. And it feels kind of in the tradition of that, almost, where it's like a little wink to the audience at the end, like, now it's coming after you, kind of a thing.
As you said, and you say the brilliant bit where he says they're gonna stick with the show, and they pretend that they've got the running time of the show is going to be longer than it needs to be. That's great.
That's a brilliant touch as well, when they say, "Oh, we've had to cancel the next program."
That's a really, really good touch.
Sarah, stay where you are, please. Sarah, stay there, please. Don't go upstairs.
Why?
Because we hear that Suzanne's got out of bed, but she's not yet appeared.
I don't know why.
She's not appeared on the landing.
Now, of course, Boyd, you didn't think it was real. I don't think it's real. A lot of people obviously just enjoyed it and appreciated it for what it was, a brilliantly told drama. But there were people who genuinely thought it was real, and I had to ask this. I did a little shout out on Twitter, and I sort of said, look, if there's anyone who does remember watching it the night it aired, what they thought of it, did you think it was real? Let us know your stories. And we got loads of replies. I mean, I think obviously Ghostwatch is really something that strikes a chord still with British audiences, and so many people got in touch with their stories. Sean on Twitter, that's at K Lankster, said, I recorded it due to pub commitments of my 21-year-old self, but when I came home that night, I remember my dad, who had watched it live, stalking the house, shaking his head, muttering, the BBC should know better than to mess around with that kind of stuff, which is really funny. And it's that kind of mix of sort of being terrified and also being very angry at the BBC that feels very real. Matthew Biggs said, I was 11, it terrified me. The stuff with the scratches on the girl, believed all the phone-in stuff, seeing people in the curtains. I was scared of my bathroom radiator for a while in fear of pipes. And again, pipes is obviously, from all the feedback we got, a ghost, a spectre, a demon that absolutely terrified so many people, especially kids who stayed up late that night and watched it when they shouldn't have been. Also got a brilliant email from Greg Catrambone, who's told me his story. It's quite long, but I'll shorten it down. But he basically says, yes, Ghostwatch, this literally traumatised me as a kid. I couldn't sleep without a light on for months. Still today, I get a shiver whenever I hear the word pipes. He said, I saw it advertised. Not sure if any of you guys remember, but there used to be a show on ITV called Strange But True. I thought it was going to be something similar to that, but boy, was I wrong. So it began, and seeing Sarah Green, who at that time presented kids' Saturday morning shows, gave me comfort. But come to think of it, it was clever casting because as a kid, we trusted Sarah. Nothing bad would happen with her around. Anyway, 10 minutes in, I was shaking uncontrollably, scared, thinking, is this all real? Surely not. There's no such thing as ghosts. And then I saw him, or at least I thought I saw him, pipes standing near the curtains. Or was it just my imagination? I remember the call-in line, 081 811 8181. It was the same number they used for Saturday morning kids' TV phone-ins. Even more reason to believe that this was real. Then I remember one of the kids had been caught banging on the pipes. Phew, it was a hoax, we're all safe. It was just the kids acting up. Just when I was starting to relax, thinking it was the kids all along, bang, 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 what the fuck was that? Pipes, it's real. It wasn't a hoax, and that was enough for me. I couldn't watch anymore. I was shaking uncontrollably. And then very quickly, one more email here from John Reed, which is interesting. He said, "Hi Mike, in 1992 I had graduated from uni and I'd taken a temp job with Directory Inquiries. I was working that night and all was going normally until at a certain point later on in the evening we were suddenly hammered by huge numbers of worried and scared people calling us, asking for the number of the BBC. We're talking hundreds. We had no idea what was going on, but from the snippets of information that we got, it was clear that they had just watched something that had scared them very badly, something that they thought was real. The next day I sat down and watched a VHS of the programme that my mum had taped for me. It wasn't until I watched it that I could appreciate how so many people could have believed that what they were seeing was real. Even in the cold light of day, it was and remains utterly chilling." So there you go. I think just all of these different stories coming into play of just how much this affected people that watched it on October 31st, 1992.
We've got some lights in the studio. I don't know. There's cameras, but I don't know which one's working. I mean, there are no cameramen. I mean, it's difficult to know, even if anybody's still with us, but if they are, this is the scene in this studio, this totally deserted studio. The autocue's working. Round and round the garden like a teddy bear.
Didn't believe that story about the sadness. Did you?
So before we finish,
yes.
I've asked you already. I know your favourite horror film is Dressed to Kill, obviously.
Yes, obviously.
Do you have a favourite ghost movie?
Well, I think unfortunately, and to be boring, it probably is The Shining.
Of
course,
same as yours. Yeah, of course.
Because of all the reasons. I mean, it is one of my favourite films, and it is an absolute ghost story.
Yeah,
and but I absolutely love the others. I remember, I remember watching that in the cinema and thinking it was so brilliantly done. Bottom line, it is The Shining because The Shining is, I think, a lot of Stanley Kubrick's films, he's known for being cold and all of that, and a technician,
yes,
and for there being, and of course, the whole, his whole design, every shot, being
so meticulous
and symmetrical and all of that, but The Shining for me is an incredibly visceral viewing experience.
Yes,
it's just it really does work as an absolutely terrifying horror film. And the creepy stuff is unbelievably creepy. So Jack Nicholson in the bar, with
amazing.
Those scenes are
amazing.
Absolutely, are fucking incredible.
I've never quite understood the criticism about Kubrick being too cold in a way, because when you look at like A Clockwork Orange and just loads of his movies, I just think, God, they're very human.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the wrong. I think it's because they're so technically accomplished.
Yes.
And I think because you can kind of tell a Kubrick scene.
Yes, you can.
From other directors, and when other directors do a similar thing, you go, "Oh, it's very Kubrickian."
Yeah.
And maybe 2001, but even then, 2001 for a lot of the right time is chilly, isn't it? I guess it's literally like there's a whole, you're just watching these men in space, stuff happening, and
that's the most.
That's the most Kubrickian Kubrick film.
Yeah,
that one, you sound like a twat. But The Shining is a different thing, and I think The Shining gets is an emotional in turmoil.
Yeah,
of course, at the end, once she's being roundly abused. Poor Shelley Duvall. So but bottom line, it's The Shining. I think it is the masterpiece. I think it is one of my favorite films. And it's got to be my favourite horror film, my favourite ghost story,
Wonderful, great stuff. Boyd, thank you again for joining me. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Cheers.
And again, just a couple of little plugs. So where can people find you? You've got a podcast, you're on Twitter.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter at my name, at Boyd Hilton. Our weekly film and TV, mainly podcast is The Unmissables, which is out every Tuesday. And my football podcast, if you're into that, is Footballistically Arsenal.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Mike.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to my brilliant guests, Lesley Manning and Boyd Hilton. Don't forget, if you want to follow either of those two on social media and keep up to date with what they're up to, all of their details will be listed in the show notes. So get in touch with us. What did you think of this week's show? What do you think of Ghostwatch? What did you think when you first saw it? Were you there the night that it aired? And what were you thinking when you watched it? Did you believe it? Were you one of the people that thought it was real? I'd love to hear from you. Please do get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com, or you can tweet at evolutionpod, or you can join the Facebook discussion group. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, and you can discuss the movie, the podcast, and other horror movies with other listeners. So please do get involved. And if you get a chance, please do subscribe to us on iTunes or whatever podcast platform you use, and drop us a little rating or review. Any good reviews we get really helps give the podcast a boost and get discovered by new listeners. Okay, well, next week we are staying in 1992, but we're catapulting back across the Atlantic over to American mainstream cinema once more. And we're going to talk about a movie that may be a little bit contentious, putting it in the evolution of the ghost story. I know a lot of people thought that this should have been included in the Slasher series last year. And to be honest, I mean, I don't know how I'd categorise this film. It's a kind of supernatural, ghostly, folk horror slasher, I suppose. So it's going to get included at some point. I thought we might as well include it now. Next week, I'm going to be joined by the brilliant Sam Ashurst from the Arrow Video Podcast, and we are going to discuss that terrifying classic, Candyman. So much fascinating stuff to discuss in this brilliant horror masterpiece. We will be talking about it in spoilerific detail. If you haven't seen Candyman, what are you doing? Go away and watch it and join in the discussion next week. You are definitely not going to want to miss this. So join me then for all of this. So join the evolutions and more. So join me then.